Where'd you find it?
My lightweight robe I wore yesterday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shoot. Liza.
Cameron, can you hear anything?
I can now.
You can hear me. I can't hear them though.
Oh, well, it's nice to hear anybody at this point.
Ah, hi there.
Okay.
Are you getting their audio?
No,
Okay.
I sent Tyler an email, but I don't know if he has time to look at it when he's trying to set up a meeting.
Yeah, fair enough.
It has to be on their end if both you and I can't hear it.
Well, that's why I was asking you.
Yeah, well, we could have our own little meeting out here.
Yeah, we could. That's great.
Might be a little shorter than the one we're supposed to be going into.
But that's true.
Now let's see who else we have here. Ah, that's not the only thing that's not working. On my end, I'm supposed to be able to see a list of participants, and I have that emblem on the bottom of my screen, but it won't go anywhere. So they must be having issues at their end.
I can see the participants.
Well, that's something. Can you read lips?
Ah,
Through the technological desert we're in.
yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I ever told you congratulations on your promotion.
Oh, wait, thank you.
You've been such a big part of Commute Options for so long. It's nice to see you get the recognition.
I appreciate that. That's very
bigger paycheck, hopefully.
yeah, with a bigger amount of workload.
Yes. How many employees does Commute Options have?
We have 7 now.
Wow, that's a big growth from the last time I talked to whoever preceded you.
Yeah, we were traditionally kind of hovering around 3 full-time employees, but I have, organized some expansion and taking on some new programs and contracts and expanded some of the things that we were doing already at that time. So it's been good growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think about the first time, I can't remember, John somebody was the first director of Commute Options I remember, and he was a strong advocate.
He was back in the 90s.
Remind me who preceded you.
Jeff Munson.
Right. And he certainly has been a strong advocate. So your organization has been fortunate in its leadership.
That's true. It's nice for you to say that as well. I appreciate that.
Well, I get to hear you explain things in common sense words that I can actually put together with the rest of my understanding. So that's really important when you're writing for something that you don't participate in directly.
That's key feedback. I appreciate that too. And that's something that we really value ourselves, is being able to decipher all this language into something that everybody can absorb. Otherwise, it doesn't mean much to anyone.
Yeah, and I'm always conscious when I'm writing that there's a larger accessibility by the public to whatever it is we write and put out there on the net.
Mhm.
And that has changed some of the way I write.
Oh, good.
When I think about people who have English as a second language, maybe I don't take so many shortcuts
Mhm.
because that may not translate well.
It doesn't, yeah, yep, absolutely.
And it's really great to see the greater public participation mostly. Now that we're having hybrid meetings, I think it opens up the public and it opens up to the public in a way we didn't before COVID.
Absolutely. I would fully agree with that as well.
So a blessing in disguise.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
it shoved a bunch of us into the 21st century. I have not been a fan of online meetings since, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago.
Hmm.
And now I've attended for nearly 2 years, I guess, 3 years. And I much prefer it because I can write the minutes while I'm having the meeting.
Yep, absolutely. And where are you right now? Where are you?
I'm in my office.
Are you in Bend?
Can you see me as well as hear me?
I can see you. I'm just curious. Are you in Bend? Or are you in?
I'm in Bend. I'm
Are you-
in Bend.
Okay.
And actually, if we don't get connected with everybody else, this will be my last meeting with the TAC. I'm retiring this year.
I
My
didn't know that.
Independence Day is July 1st and I can hardly wait.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Long time coming.
That's fantastic. How many years?
I started with the MPO, I believe, in 2006.
Wow.
But before that, I did 15 years with the City of Bend, Planning Commission and a bunch of other committees, advisory, not council minutes.
Yeah.
And in between that, I worked for the City of Redmond from 2010 through 2022.
Okay. Wow. Well,
And I
congratulations.
had a very brief stint with the City of Madras.
Okay. So you've been in the area, this area then.
I've lived here for going on 42 years.
Wow.
So I watched Bend grow from not quite 20,000 people to where we are sit today. And it's amazing. I have a high respect for the community and for the citizens who care enough to get involved.
Yeah.
And volunteer opportunities I've had and been able to take part with has helped me feel a part of the community from the first day I stepped foot in Bend.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, well done.
Thank you.
Hmm.
One of the challenges to writing minutes is as a contractor who's not a city employee, or state employee or anything, I'm kind of invisible.
True.
Cameron.
Oh, boy.
Oh, got it.
Nice to see and be seen.
How do we?
We've been hearing your whole conversation.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, you heard the Cameron's retiring then?
Yes.
I was gonna wait for Tyler to make that announcement.
Oh, we outed you already.
I'm surprised when he does. All right, well, sorry, everyone. Let me just share this.
Good to talk to you, Cameron.
Thank you, Brian.
David Emerson's trying to join. He's having issues, so I just asked him to sign in again.
Let me see.
Let's get to work here. Okay. Oh, there's David. Who else do we have? Casey. I guess I can take my stuff off here. And Liza. And I go there. Casey, okay, Casey.
All right. I will call this meeting of the Bend MPO Technical Advisory Committee to order. Just a moment. I can't see. Cameron, do you have a question?
No, I've lost access to something and I'll take me off in a minute.
All right, I'll just go through who I can see on screen and then we'll do introductions here in the room. So we have Cameron Prow from Typewrite 2, who is our minute taker. Brian Potwin from Commute Options. Liza Hamada, one of our local resident members. David Amerton from ODOT Region 4. Robin Lewis from the City of Bend. Rachel Zachem from CET. I believe, is that who you're representing today, Rachel? Hovey from ODOT Regional Transit. And that's it. And then in the room here, you want to start, Brian?
Yeah, Brian Rankin, I manage the growth management division, focused on long-range planning at the City of Bend.
You want to go, Peter?
Peter Russell, Deschutes County Planning for another 23 days. I'm Tarek Ron, I'm a planner with Deschutes County, kind of shadowing Peter today.
23 days.
Yeah, well, he's documenting what he does every day, so far it's a blank sheet. Yeah.
Question marks.
Yeah.
Dave Thompson, feedback.
Greg Bryant, Deschutes River Woods.
I'm Jennifer Napa, senior planner. Lisa Bush, associate planner in the City of Bend.
Eric Lentz, Cascades East Transit. This is Damian Cernick. I'm senior planner with the city's road management division.
Andrea Napoli with the Bend MPO.
All right, thank you. I think because everything we got started late, I'm gonna jump us ahead to into the City of Bend's presentation on their climate friendly areas study and the Stevens Road Tract update. And I will turn that over to Elise and Jennifer and others. Yes. There you go.
Can you hear all the folks in the room? Can we just get a nod of heads? Okay, so we'll have to have some people at the end of the table speak up. So you can be heard. Pulling up a presentation right now on the climate friendly areas update. And so I'll just kind of provide a little bit of background here is that as I'm sure the MPO TAC knows, or some of the members know, some rules were passed by the state recently and last, Damian, when was it? Was it last year? 2022. 2022. That pertain to Oregon cities, in this case, City Bend over 100,000 in an MPO. So we have certain rules that we have to comply with. And one of those standards that we're talking about today is a climate friendly area, ultimately a designation. But right now there's a study phase. So today we'll be talking about a couple different projects. So it's mostly on climate friendly area study. We have Damian Cernick here to provide an update on the Stevens Road Tract, which is a project that the City of Bend is undertaking, continuing after some legislation was passed, and Damian will get into that. So it's kind of here's an opportunity to provide some input on the climate friendly areas study. And that's why we're here today, to get your perspectives, get your ideas, and improve understanding of the project. And then Damian will provide that update on the Stevens Road Tract. And just a note, as many people understand,
The green one here.
we're in technical difficulty land. So as many people
We're good now.
may know, the rules for climate friendly areas were adopted last year. There were some temporary rule changes a couple of months ago. I'm sitting on a rack. Damian's sitting on a TAC, considering more rule changes. There's also a Court of Appeals case that is challenging the rules. A number of cities are challenging the rules kind of outright. And so I think it's just fair to say new rules, things are in motion, things are evolving and changing. And, you know, we're here to kind of do our best to address the rules and also adjust to the changes that could be coming from either the Court of Appeals or DLCD, LCDC. And with that, Elise from our team, take it from there. We're going to share the presentation, by the way, so we'll have different speakers today.
All right, so a climate friendly area or a CFA is an area where residents can live, work, and meet most of their daily trips without using a vehicle. The rules come from CPEC. As part of CPEC, Bend is required to study and designate a climate friendly area. But if you think about it, Bend has a lot of areas that already act like this. Downtown and the central west side are kind of mixed use areas that have a combination of residential uses and commercial uses, where it is easy to get around without needing a car. So a climate friendly area would theoretically operate the same way. This is also in line with the city's plans and policies for areas like the Bend Central District, which allows a mix of uses as well. And one really strong focus of the CPEC rules is equity. So underserved communities are centered in the decision of where these should go.
Yeah, so the focus of the outreach plan is to center the voices of historically underserved community members and to provide meaningful opportunities for equitable involvement. So far, we've conducted one-on-one interviews with people in leadership positions that represent vulnerable populations. We've partnered with the COCC Latinx student college prep program, and we presented their winter curriculum, and they came and presented their projects here at City Hall to staff, the mayor, and the city manager. We also had an equity focus group where we got input on some preliminary mapping that we had done. So thank you, Eric, for participating in that.
So just building on what Elise had mentioned, what is a climate friendly area? It's a designation. It's like essentially a zoning designation. You change your zoning map or your comprehensive plan map. You adopt development regulations that are really aimed at creating a new kind of place for Bend. I don't think it's really all that new compared to some places in Bend already. But that's what it is. So at the front end, that's what the city has to do. So when we're talking about study, we're like, where should the city designate a climate friendly area, change our zoning maps, take a look at our development code and make sure it is aligned with the goals and the requirements of the state. So one of the pieces that we've started taking a look at, just to give the community an idea of some of the policy issues and also some of the practical implications, is around sizing. So the rules require that a climate friendly area be sized to accommodate 30% of your existing housing units and 30% of your new housing units. Right. So if you take a look at some of the data that we have regarding housing units in the current urban growth boundary, and then we take a look at our forecasts for housing units between now and 2028, that total number of units to be accommodated in the area we designate as a CFA would be over 15,000 housing units. The state also has rules that essentially give you a recipe to figure out, okay, well, how, based on that number of housing units, if you build to certain standards, how many acres would that be, right? And so in Bend, we've done a couple different takes at this under two different, I'll call them policy scenarios. So we estimate that between 275 and 350 acres would need to be designated. And this is theoretical capacity. So what this is assuming is, in that 275 to 350 acres, the majority of this eventually over time, and it's not time limited, by the way, it's not a 10-year period or a 20-year period, that this is sized to accommodate that many housing units, and it's a theoretical kind of redevelopment capacity. That's very different than actual market-based capacity, right? Because we know that the redevelopment takes time, but the idea is from the state, I think, is you designate these areas, you zone to allow, and you do a good job there. Ultimately, you end up investing in this area, and it will create incentive for the redevelopment. And that redevelopment essentially we have to demonstrate that we're going to be able to provide that many housing units in a theoretical capacity sense. The sizing, the actual sizing, so you'll notice a range, 275 to 350 acres. Well, why the difference and why that variation? It's based on a policy choice on building height. So the building height standards in the rules have an 85-foot height standard for your CFA. That's one option. You can say, look, we're going to take the state's rules. We'll go to 85 foot. We'll allow a 10-foot bonus for affordable housing. And if that's the case, then you need fewer acres, right? So taller buildings, you need fewer acres, around 275. If the city sticks with its current policies on height, and you'll see this reflected in some of the developments that you'll see, particularly in the west side, you may be aware of the timber yards. You may be aware of like the old raised redevelopment site, the Hickson. So if we stick with those policies and those development standards, we would need more space, and that would be about 350 acres. So in addition to the sizing, there are options in terms of where you place that designation. And these are all illustrative, so we're just trying to get people thinking, right? Thinking about opportunities, thinking about concerns. And so generally speaking, you can accommodate that acreage within one large area, for example. Or you could have, say, a central area with a couple smaller areas that would allow those building heights and that mix of uses. Or you could take that same acreage and distribute it out to different locations in the community that are appropriate. And important to mention the implications of a climate-friendly area. So there's we have size, we have some options on where, but ultimately climate-friendly areas are intended to accommodate housing, but they're also intended to reduce reliance on the automobile so the state can achieve its greenhouse gas reduction goals. And reducing vehicle miles traveled is one of those requirements. So the rules are chock full of references to not increasing vehicle miles traveled per capita. So the CFA is a mechanism or a tool to help do that over time. It'll also influence transportation planning, ultimately transportation investments. There will be ongoing monitoring of what's happening inside of a climate-friendly area. So the rules say we're going to provide reports, and we're going to track things like how many affordable housing units, what percentage of our budget is going to be spent on multimodal projects in these climate-friendly areas. So they're looking at spending, they're looking at investments. We have to do other things too, like multimodal gap summaries, highway impact analysis, and then you're allocating growth to these CFAs at the top.
So there's a lot of flexibility in where CFA could go and how many could be designated, but for this phase of the project in 2023, we are looking to study and analyze areas that could potentially become a CFA with the actual decision of where being made in the next couple of years. On the map on the screen, we have identified some possible CFAs, and this is really based on kind of existing land use designations. We looked at existing commercial and mixed use areas. We tried to stay away from low density residential areas. We also considered existing employment centers and areas where the bike, ped, and transit networks are really strong because that is a requirement of the rules. It could be one of these, it could be a combination of a few of these because we have a certain amount of acreage that we have to get to, as Brian mentioned. And in conjunction with kind of identifying potential areas, we developed a mapping tool, and our goal was to kind of let data tell us what might be the best potential CFA based on the requirements and the rules. So we looked at connectivity, opportunity, and equity. This is our connectivity map. We have a bunch of different data sets in this map, things like the number of transit stops, the presence of the existing low stress network, the planned low stress network, presence of bike lanes, sidewalk facilities, intersection density, and our goal was to kind of wrap all of those things into one map and see which areas score the highest. Each of the hexagons on this map is 25 acres, and we did this to kind of visualize the city on that level because it's kind of comparable to CFA sizing. So the darkest hexagons scored the highest on this map. We also looked at what we called opportunity, which is really population density, employment density, employment diversity, so the number of different businesses within a hexagon, because CFAs are supposed to be amenity rich and have lots of different businesses that you could walk to. And this also looks at land use compatibility, so whether or not the hexagon is located in the zoning district that permits multi-unit residential already. And then the other thing that the rules require is that you, as a city, kind of acknowledge that large zoning and transportation changes historically have affected underserved communities disproportionately. So the rules ask you to analyze your city for the threat of displacement in certain neighborhoods. And this is a very simple map. There's a lot of information that went into it. This looks at displacement risk. So we're looking at different demographic indicators from American Community Survey data. This looks at income. It looks at the area median income within Bend and which neighborhoods make significantly more than that, which makes significantly less. It looks at the housing market activity, so whether or not rents and home prices are both increasing or just one of them or none. And then it looks at demographic change, which is a really good indicator of gentrification. So has the population of people who live in a neighborhood changed really significantly in terms of demographics? And all of these were folded into a formula, and it assigns different levels of stages of gentrification in neighborhoods in Bend. What we found is the areas in purple are the most vulnerable areas of Bend in terms of displacement in the event of a CFA designation. It doesn't necessarily mean that the gray areas are not overpriced or pricing people out. We were just trying to identify which ones to be the most careful with in terms of zoning changes. And as part of the study, we have to determine how we would mitigate displacements in the event of designation. This is our timeline for the project. So as I mentioned, our current phase is to study potential CFAs. We have to submit that study to the state at the end of the year. The next phase in 2024 is really going to involve digging into which CFA should be designated, and the adoption will come in 2025. And throughout all 3 years, we are doing community engagement.
I got a question. Is my question is the city of Bend presenting this, or is the MPO presenting this?
What do you mean? It's,
Well, she says she's presenting it to the state.
yeah, it's a city project. Or
It's a state project, so they're doing it. So it's not, hasn't got any MPO.
No, I mean, what it has to
And
do.
I'm just asking, why are they presenting it to us?
Well, because ultimately it's gonna impact, it'll impact our long range planning and project selection and that type of thing as
Okay,
well.
what I'm asking is, I don't know if the county's doing anything like this.
No,
We see I read the information, anything over 5,000 people population, we're supposed to be doing this. And Deschutes River Woods is over 5,000 people.
So this
So my question is the county doing this?
No. So when this came up, these rules first proposed, first thing the county asked is, do we have to play? No, it's within cities, so we don't have to do any of this.
Yeah, but the requirements were if you were within our urban area, 5,000 people or more, this is supposed to be done.
But you're not in an urban area.
Cities
Oh,
within-
You're in county rural zoning, so it doesn't apply to you. You may have urban like densities, that's true, but your underlying zoning, it doesn't apply. to you.
Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I know planning staff, because I'd sent this question over to county planning staff right after the rules were proposed, and I know county planning staff looked into it. I think he corresponded with DLCD staff and got clarification that it doesn't need to. These rules don't need to be followed in Deschutes River Woods, or if we had other areas of that size that are adjacent or part of our MPO.
Just because we are not a city.
You're also, if you were in the urban growth boundary, for example,
No, I understand.
then you would naturally be caught up.
This is the exact reason why I am looking into Deschutes River Woods becoming a city of themselves. Because I feel like we aren't getting the right attention. Okay, so.
So one question I had for the 3 variables, did you equally weight them, or are they?
No, I was looking at the thing that said within urban or supposed to live in their areas and 5,000 people. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Your rural zoning said it applies. So the three variables you looked at, did you weight them all equally or did you, or some weighted more than others? What you're saying?
Oh, no, I'm just looking at all the different.
No, I know, I'm looking. at
Oh,
but-
okay, you're
but yeah,
talking to them.
looking beyond you. I know it's hard to
I
do,
got you.
but looking beyond.
I got you. Okay. Go ahead, Peter.
They're all weighted equally. We kind of overlaid, I don't have it on this slide, but during the slide deck, but we overlaid the connectivity and the opportunity. The anti-displacement stuff is kind of, we're figuring out how to factor that in, but we're hoping it'll kind of all come together and data wise we'll have.
They're all equally weighted so far.
But it's just a factor really in selecting them. It's not necessarily the most important.
Yeah, and there's some other, we're bringing this out at a fairly early stage, right? So we're working through the study. We're looking for input, weighting, is one example. Some folks, don't use this data set, use this data set, weight this. So those are the kinds of, input we're looking at and looking for. But all of these are works in progress. So we have an opportunity to change. These aren't fixed, in other words. So the maps are evolving, the approach is evolving.
So for next steps for the community engagement, we're gonna have community pop-ups going on throughout the summer. We're also gonna be presenting and meeting with stakeholder groups. And then in the autumn.
And as I mentioned, the study is due to state that in the year.
Good. David Amundson, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, I guess two comments. One, it's been difficult to hear folks the last minute or so. And then also, I think there was a question about how this applies to the counties. So the CFA requirement only applies to cities and counties within incorporated cities or UGBs.
All right. Yeah.
I guess any questions we can answer right now?
Yeah, so looking for thoughts, considerations, suggestions, concerns. It's a good technical audience, so have at it.
So I'm curious, in the model where you had a bunch of distributed smaller CFAs, how that will play into this idea that it's kind of self-contained. I can see a big one and how that works, but I'm not sure I understand if you have little isolated ones, how they would fit definition.
Yeah, there is flexibility in how dense a CFA has to be, and there's kind of two options for the zoning decisions that you make. You could potentially designate a very large, dense CFA, but you could also do kind of neighborhood scale CFAs where the buildings don't have to be as tall, the minimum density doesn't have to be as high. So I think at this time, we're just considering smaller areas as well, kind of like dispersed throughout the city. I don't know if Brian mentioned, but the overall goal of the CFAC rules is to lower vehicle miles traveled. So I think there's a case to be made for kind of like neighborhood commercial scale CFAs.
Well, that's what really was where my question was. Can you really reduce automobile travel if your CFA is only
I can chime in
10
there
square
too.
blocks?
As Cascades East Transit, I was participating in some of the focus groups early on too. We're looking at the existing zoning and all that right now, but for our transportation system plan and, the CET master plan, we're looking at moving to mobility hubs and neighborhood scale transportation. So in the event that we go for these smaller distributed CFAs, CET would be ready to support that with mobility hubs connecting each of these areas and making it more of a network that we can get from one to the other.
Brian, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Brian Popwin, Community Options. So with this, I looking at the map, I see a lot of areas that have already been developed that have been highlighted. Will there be an incentive for developers to move forward with the CFA, or how does that work? I'm just thinking about, looking on Highway 20 that you had marked out. There's the bowling alley there and all of that. Like, how does that get incorporated into actually moving this forward into on the ground change?
Could you scroll back to that slide? Sure.
So it's a good question, and there's almost we received a grant, it's a small grant from the state of Oregon, from DLCD. To do it's calling it a CFA market study. That is, the intent is to help answer some of those questions, Brian. And look at, well, given the cost of materials and the cost of labor and adequate return on the investment, interest rates, et cetera, if you're going to build this kind of building, and we've tested a couple different kinds of buildings, right? An 85-foot tall building, we've looked at 65-foot tall buildings, we've also looked at more kind of standalone 3-story residential, right? And asking the question, well, if you had this kind of designation, which allows this kind of use, does it trigger a market response? And how strong is that market response, right? And the study is not, we're not completed, and it's not completed, we're not finished, we're still moving through that study. I think the grant ends pretty soon here. But what we're learning from that is that, that some of the development standards that the city of Bend already has in place, essentially going up to about, I think, 65 foot of height with a 10-foot height bonus, that construction type associated with that kind of style is a lower cost construction type, and therefore it tends to pencil out more for developers. And that has demonstrated itself as a building type that the private sector and developers, given the right opportunities, are willing to invest in, right? So you'll see these happening around town. And a couple on the west side, we have the Timber Yards project down by Core Pine. So clearly that, given the financial conditions in the last couple of years with low interest rates, even with higher construction costs and labor costs, there's some incentive to move ahead and for the private sector to basically uptake that zoning. So I think part of this is part of the kind of policy discussion around how do you want to use a climate friendly area, right? Do you use it as a tool to incentivize redevelopment in a place where currently you may not see much redevelopment, right? And that would probably be in areas that have different policy. I would say where the difference between a CFA, a more dense and intense CFA, is really different than the existing underlying zoning. And I tend to think like the commercial areas on 3rd Street, for example, right? Where you can't do that today, but if you could, it may create a financial incentive to move in that direction. And then the other factor here is that CFAs are intended to be a source of public investment, right? So public investment can also create an incentive for redevelopment opportunities. So I don't know if that answered your question, Brian, but it's certainly a part of it. And then I think also, excuse me, what we're learning is that, this is going to take time, to get that kind of redevelopment pattern across a couple hundred acres is decades. We're measuring this in many decades. This is not just overnight or even 10 or 20 years. It's going to take a long time for these areas to mature.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
So two thoughts. One sarcastic because it's my last meeting and I want to make sure I know last meeting. So you're whopping the whole thing in Juniper Ridge. You've got 1,500 acres up there. You could make just a mixed use mecca. That was my sarcastic one. And then the other one is how do you accommodate or does the model accommodate the changeover in the fleet? So you hear all this about electric vehicles, things like that, which have lower emission. So you might be able to achieve some of those things, not necessarily the DMT, but if the overriding goal is here with greenhouse gases, if you're taking 2-3 decades to get this to max out, you may already be getting there just by changeover vehicle type, even though Oregonians hang on to their cars forever. It's like 11 or 14 years is your average time of ownership, so.
So like, Brian, you can take this up.
Well, so we're practicing body language in our presentations, like. And then, and I'll be the catcher's mitt if I need to.
So I'm gonna take a step, Peter, because this is what we've learned in working with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. In the TPR right now, there are scenario rules for scenario planning. Cities like Bend have to reduce their VMT, by a percentage of 20 to 25% based on when we start and when our horizon there ends. What we've learned from the department is that there are certain things we can rely on as assumptions that would be components of that reduction. They include changeover in fleet, changing fuel mix, increases in transit and how those are factored in, so that as you look at that increment of reduction for say 20%, that becomes more like 10 to 15% in terms of looking at what we would influence through changes in land use.
Yeah, and that's, it's almost so the CFA study is one part of Division 12, which Division 12 regulates transportation, how cities plan for transportation, how counties plan for transportation looking forward. So there are other changes in those rules, very substantial changes that were made to those rules recently. So it's not just about CFA designation. And Damien alluded to it, which is that there will be, cities, in our case in Bend, will say, okay, we have to demonstrate essentially how we're going to hit statewide GHG reduction targets and targets in Division 12. They're kind of allocated down to the region and down to Bend. So Damien mentioned a few of them, and they include things like parking pricing. So City of Bend is going to be expected to show when we update our transportation plan, how we're going to achieve these statewide goals. Parking pricing, fleet is kind of out of our control. So they're like, you get a credit for that, Peter. So it's like, okay, the fleet will change. That's factors outside of the city's control. But, vehicle mile VMT reduction is another big one. I think transit frequency is supposed to increase by 3 times, three or four times. So the city's going to have to do this work. And that's part of why we're not designating the CFA now, is that we want to be able to take a look at all these Division 12 requirements. And when we do our next, I would call it a big project in terms of how Bend is going to grow to support economic development and housing, we take those Division 12 requirements and pull them in at the same time. So we do it all at the same time to figure out how we're going to grow, meet our housing need, meet our economic development needs, and meet these new requirements in Division 12. So that's kind of our overall strategy. Long answer to your question, but it kind of puts these CFAs in perspective, I think, a little bit.
So Juniper Ridge and mixed use mecca still live.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting, and it's interesting because these maps, clearly, there are other opportunities for CFAs. These are kind of the naturals, I would say, like these are the naturals. And somebody said, well, why not Juniper Ridge? Well, you could look at that. It's publicly owned property. It's zone industrial now, but you can change the zoning just like we would change the zoning here. But what might fight against that would be vehicle miles traveled reduction. So if you're urbanizing that area and putting 30% of your housing up there, I would guess that our VMT would go through the roof.
It'd go up, but
Yeah.
maybe you have enough concentration that transit would be more feasible there.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. So we haven't modeled it yet, but that's kind of the idea, is to model these ideas, take a look at them, get public input. So I'm gonna, since you're not gonna be here when we do this, we're gonna say Peter Russell said we should put a CFA at Juniper Ridge. We'll write
There you
this
go.
one down.
Peter Russell, mixed use mecca.
Yeah.
Mixed use
mixed use
mecca.
mecca. I like that.
Got a market. That's something you can run to. People, they'll say, this is just density. And what happens when you utter the B word.
There's also you take into consideration how many people this affects. Is that part of the calculation? Because I mean, you want to do it over at large, so you're affecting as many people as possible.
Yeah, it's a policy choice. Like, it depends how dramatically you want to change the zoning. We have the option not to, like the heights and density are roughly the same. And then you have to do more area.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, and to kind of, I think Jennifer, you can speak to this too, is that based on some of those calculations of capacity and size, right? It could be possible to designate Bend Central District and Core Pine, for example, and maybe a little bit more area in that part of town. Not really change the heights, not really change the uses all that much. It's not a big change of policy. And that would be close to meeting your requirements for CFA sizing, if I'm correct. Yeah, so there are places where it's big policy change and places where it's not a big policy change.
I'd make one other comment, which is we're looking at a point in time, right? These are the rules that have been put forward to try and make progress on a global problem. The rules are going to get stricter. This is not the last round of how the hell are we going to avoid a huge problem here. This is only almost the beginning. So when you're looking at opportunity areas, you might think about the fact you're going to be asked to look for more soon. So you might as well, keep that in mind. It's not going to get easier.
True, and that is why we're casting a wide net to have a bigger discussion, right, about potential changes, right? So when you look at that map, as we look forward in the future and ask how we're going to accommodate our housing goals, our economic development goals, our transportation goals. CFAs are one tool, but there are other tools as well. You could look at more intensive rezoning, you could allow more residential and commercial areas to create more mixed use, like more at a horizontal scale. So you're absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons why we're having a broader conversation rather than just coming and saying, we think that Bend Central District should be your CFA, right? So, yeah. Thanks.
Robin, see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just reacting to what everyone's saying. On the use of Juniper Ridge, I really think each of these CFA areas, they're like a mini community in and of themselves. So they are highly functional within themselves, so that your needs are met within this area. And that's what decreases your VMT. That's what allows you to walk and bike and take shuttles or whatever, because it's more contained. We have that downtown. I feel like Juniper Ridge, we could achieve that because it has enough size. But you think about, proximity to schools, proximity to parks, proximity to, amenities, all of the things that, and where your jobs are, right? So it's not just the density of housing, but it's like the job centers. I feel like Juniper Ridge could achieve that very well. And I question whether some of the stuff on South 3rd Street could achieve that at all, because it doesn't have those amenities. It might have jobs and it might have large scale vacant land, but it doesn't have any amenities. So there's no schools, no parks, no trails. So you would have to leave, for most of your trips out of there to get to those aspects. So I think we should add Juniper Ridge. It's interesting that it's not.
Just to add on to like some of the comments on the maps and stuff. We were looking at, I think your next presentation is Stevens Tract. And we've got the southeast area plan. The elbow is a big area coming into the UGB. So these are areas that are going to be naturally built to higher standards, whether it's a CFA or not. Going back to that map, that was the anti-displacement map. That band was pretty much what came in as county land in the 80s and 90s and developed through the 90s. Yeah. And after that got developed, we made higher standards. So whatever happens in the southeast area is going to be developed differently, have different land use patterns than that band in particular there. So that doesn't have many amenities because of the rules that were in place at the time. And that's already changed outside of the CFA stuff. So CFA work can kind of supercharge what we're doing here. But as far as carbon reduction, we're gonna be seeing a lot of things just across the board from our land use rules in place.
Right. Any other questions on the CFA work that's been presented? If not, you're gonna do a Stevens update as well. Just a quick time check for everybody. It's 10 of 11. I mean, it's 10 till. Everybody good if we run 10-15 minutes long today? Okay, all right. Are you gonna run with this one, Damien?
Yeah, and before I start, could somebody like wave their hand, let me know if you can hear me? All right, thank you, Peter. I meant to say on camera, but that's great. So we're gonna shift gears now from the work we're doing in climate friendly areas to our Stevens Road track project. Just to orient people, we're referring to a tract of land that's currently owned by the Oregon Department of State Lands. It's shown there on the graphic on the right, in case of that black line. It's 261 acres in size, due east of the Trans-Canada National Natural Gas Pipeline, and between Stevens Road to the north and what will be an extension of Ferguson Road to the south. The area to the west of it, on the left side, is the Stevens Ranch Master Plan. It was already in the urban growth boundary. And just for orientation, just south and west of that is the southeast expansion area. That's also included in the urban growth boundary. So this project that we're working on really started in 2021 when the legislature passed House Bill 3318. And what that bill did is provide the city an alternative path to include this tract in the urban growth boundary. We had really no work to do to demonstrate the need for it, but what changed with the bill is doing more work with planning the site, concept planning, and then preparing it for master planning, so that we could achieve multiple outcomes with development of property, particularly with affordable housing and housing. After the bill passed, and before August of last year, we developed a concept plan for the Stevens Road tract, and I'm going to highlight the alternative that we developed on that next slide. That's been approved by the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And now we're proceeding with the other steps in the process for including the boundary, including the property in the boundary. Just recently, I have submitted applications to the city and the county to begin the UGB amendment process. I've got that set up to go to the Bend Planning Commission for a work session and hearing in July. And I know with the county, Aubrey Stewart is working hard, trying to understand what we're doing here, but I know she's on it, so it'll be handled just fine. So we're working on that process taking place here through the summer of this year. And then we're also going to be doing working on a set of amendments to the comprehensive plan to address a number of the requirements in House Bill 3318. What we'll be proposing are a series of policy changes to our comprehensive plan, so that for the Stevens Road tract, we have a similar framework that we've used for other expansion areas, where through comprehensive plan policies, we identify how much land we are going to require for housing, commercial lands, and mixed employment. Particularly for the Stevens Road tract, we are going to be looking at policies for identifying means for preserving significant trees and rock outcrops. We recently had a pedestrian archaeological survey completed that identified and historic road in the property that we're going to be proposing to be incorporated in a green loop trail system that we're also going to require. And then the public process that we use for adoption of the amendments will mirror the one we use for the concept plan, where there'll be a public comment period. We'll look at an open house. Try to use this as an opportunity to talk to folks about it at summer events where we've got a city event table, and then take it through our planning commission and to city council for adoption. Can you go to the next slide, please? So just to give a better framework of what we're looking at for the Stevens Road tract, again, that's the right side of the slide with the brighter colors. The The tract itself, as I mentioned, is about 261 acres in size, of which we have 198 acres of buildable land to work with. And what you see there, the proposed designations are, roughly 147 acres of land for housing, including 20 acres that would be identified for deed restricted affordable housing. Another 5 acres of commercial along that extension of Southeast Wilderness Way, which roughly bisects the property in the middle, running east and west. Some additional mixed employment land to the southwest of the site. And then open space is a significant part or significant component of the Stevens Road tract, including a proposed community park, a loop trail system that I mentioned, but also allowing for some other open spaces around the area. Couple things I want to mention before taking any questions is one of the things you'll notice is that we don't have much in the way of commercial or employment land compared to housing. And one of the big reasons for that is with the Stevens Ranch Master Plan, which is on the left side of the slide. I think if memory serves me, they had about 46 acres of land for commercial development and the limited commercial and general commercial designations. And then another 93 acres of land for general industrial development, which included a 50-acre large lot industrial site that we're trying to retain for potential large lot owners, developers. So the employment commercial that we're looking at is really more intended to be more neighborhood serving, but also in its location next to the park and across Wilderness Way from a future school site that you'll see on the right, pardon me, left side of the slide. We'll also encourage, provide that opportunity for pedestrian trips around the area. So that is my short update. Are there any questions?
So my question is, okay, so the Stevens Ranch Master Plan, how long is that supposed to take? And then how long is you're supposed to start and take over also?
So Stevens Ranch is already in the boundary. It's already been,
What's the
what's your timeline?
Yeah, what's the timeline for that to happen?
5 to 10 years. They're
So-
it's already working on it.
For that one, and then what's yours? The new one.
So this one's probably gonna, once, so let me give a little bit of timeline on this. Once we're done with the planning amendments, and we
Right.
adopt those by council.
Right.
That's when the Oregon Department of State Lands will go through their process to surplus the property. And they're gonna use a process like they used for the Stevens Ranch Master Plan, where they'll surplus it. They will hopefully find a developer who will buy the property.
Right.
And then that developer will use our concept plan as a template for them looking at a final master plan for the property. So that's gonna be happening while Stevens Ranch is also developing.
Okay, so no, you're probably looking at 5 to 10 years out or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
And given Ben, it could be
Just
is your question like, when will it be fully developed?
sort of, I mean.
I think it's probably closer to 10 to 20 years. Yeah.
10, 20.
I mean, Northwest Crossing took darn near 20 years to
Yeah.
get close to build out after it was platted, master plan. So, we're talking 500 acres
Yeah.
across this whole, I mean, it's probably close to what, 500 total acres?
It's a full section,
Oh,
so it's
it's a full
over 600 acres.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
640.
yeah, it's probably a 20-year build out.
Right.
It depends on market conditions, of course.
Right.
Anybody online have questions for Damien? All right, anything in the room here?
Well, I'm just kind of curious about the overlap between the two presentations. I mean, if you looked at what you're doing here, how well would it match up to what we need to do for that? For the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, it's one we're getting with respect to Stevens Road Tract. So one of the things that we're trying to do with the Stevens Road Tract is, and this is actually in the bill itself, is looking at how we can incorporate a multimodal network within the tract, and to reflect it with the street network, south and east and west. We work with Cascades East Transit to look at integrating transit planning for the Stevens Ranch Master Plan to have a loop through Stevens Road Tract up to Stevens Road, back up to 27th Street. We're trying to arrange land uses in the area so that things are closer for greater numbers of people to get to. That's where you see like on the map, there's more high density, medium density housing next to the commercial development on the south side of Wilderness Way, which is also right across from the proposed park, which is also right next to the future school site that was identified and is being retained in the Stevens Ranch Master Plan. So those are things that we're trying to do so that, you know, getting around with modes other than getting in your car is also more feasible, easier, safer with that development, but also provides an option for people to use Wilderness Way to go west as they get to those other commercial areas that are on 27th Street.
Do you see any conflict between the, you know, one of the big goals of this with affordable housing? Do you see a conflict between development rules to make that happen versus development rules to make climate friendly areas happen, or do they play well together?
I think we're trying to do our best as a team to make sure they play well together. And that's why we, you know, we've looked at identifying sites for affordable housing that's again closer to the potential transit line up there, park, close proximity to the commercial center along Southeast Wilderness Way.
Okay.
So we're doing our part to make sure they play well together.
And I assume, you know, affordable housing tends to be higher density to start with, so that helps, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And when are you gonna look at, you know, you showed the different, on the last presentation, you showed the different configurations, centralized or various or all around. And then you have the map that shows based on data what the most likely or best suited areas would be. So when do you look at how you actually would want to see them configured?
Yeah, I think we'll not this year. The goal is to keep the study really broad and just identify anything that could become a CFA, because you have to include it in the study if you designate it. Otherwise, you have to go back and redo all your work. So try and keep it really broad, but we have 2 more years to actually make the policy decision.
Okay.
Great. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah.
On the air and title the lands from. No, that, no department.
Oh.
What's that?
Yeah, the county.
Cameron?
Yes, I don't believe we have a quorum to approve minutes.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3.
Well, we need 7 out of 12.
I think we have 7, 8. Yeah, 'cause in the room, we've got
4, 5,
Oh, yeah.
6.
move up to the big boys table.
And you got
Big kids table.
Yeah, you got started.
Yeah.
The last days.
Oops, I'm going to. Right. Oops. So I'll jump back to agenda item 4, and that's just review and approval of the May 3rd draft meeting summary. And it was included in your packet as attachment A. Can I get a motion for that?
Yeah, motion to approve the May 3rd, 2023 draft meeting summary.
All right, so Cameron, Greg made the motion and Peter Russell seconded the motion.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Opposed? All right, so just the last item, I'm gonna stop screen sharing. We just have a few minutes if anybody wants to give updates on projects or programs, things that they're working on. Anybody in the room here? Peter, you wanna? I'll let Peter jump in.
Besides, yeah, okay, so basically, as you know, the Bend MPO boundary goes out to Tumalo, half of Tumalo anyway, so we're going to have a work session on the Tumalo Community Plan on July 27th, and a hearing for the Planning Commission August 10th.
our transportation system plan. We're gonna have a work session on June 22nd, the planning commission, and then a public hearing on August 10th. So you want to see plans in action and at a fine time, August 10th is the place you want to go to give you your public comment. Also, it's my last meeting probably here, so Tarek Rawlings is transportation understudy, so we'll be taking over. Be happy to answer all your future questions.
Thank you. Eric, you,
Yeah, so Cascades East Transit has a lot of fun summer services in the works. Ride the River will be starting next week, not this weekend, but the weekend following on the 17th. And then that following week on the 21st, we're launching Transit to Trails, which is something we've been trying to get off the ground for a couple of years here, thanks to a federal grant. We'll have a shuttle running up from the usual park and ride over by the pavilion up to Mount Bachelor with a few stops along the way at Cascade Lakes Ranger Station, the Swampy Lakes, Winoga, Dutchman Flat, and on up. It's going to be a big bus with capacity for 6 bikes on the bike racks.
I'm just gonna step in real fast and say that it's actually now capacity for 8 bike racks.
Oh, nice one. So yeah, this is the first time we're gonna be able to pull this off. And we're hopeful that we can do it in years to come. So we'll keep a close eye on ridership, and if you guys have any friends that might be interested in service, help us spread the word.
and I know that was, you got special grant funding from the FTA for
Yeah.
this. Is it a 1-year grant? Is it a multi-year grant?
Rachel might have better details.
So this is a FLAP grant that we went out for in 2017, and we were granted the funding in 2018. We were supposed to start for 2 years of service, which we're supposed to start last year, but we did not have the drivers. So now we have all of the funding to spend down this year.
And then I know it's originally proposed to go out to Cascade Lakes. Is that still potentially in the scope for later?
Not this year, but we do want to hold that in mind if we can. That's of course subject to drivers. That would require an additional vehicle conducting a separate loop from Mount Bachelor, circulating around the lakes. So this year it's just going to be up and down the mountain, and it's Wednesday through Sunday, 3 times a day.
Now, since this is only gonna be for this year, is there some sort of funding you anticipate for, or you just hoping something's gonna come through?
So being a recreation route,
Yeah.
this is one that we charge fares on, and we're hopeful if we get, good ridership, it might be self-sustaining.
Okay, okay.
Do you have the fare pinned down then for that service?
$5 one way, $9 round trip.
Oh, okay.
And for those bike riders that want to ride back down,
Yeah.
we might take some one-way trips there.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. In other news, Envision Bend, some of you guys might have heard about, they had vision action teams where they brought a broad array of community members with various talents, and I was fortunate to be on one of their vision action teams called Guiding Our Growth. That was one of 4 different teams. Others looked at environment, equity, and I don't recall the other one. But ours in particular, I had David Abbas from the city of Bend on that team, and a lot of really talented people. And transportation was a big focus of how we move this area forward. And that's not looking at just Bend in particular, but greater Bend. So kind of meshing with the MPO concept. So it's a really encouraging process to witness and be a part of, and I think there's going to be a lot of good ideas coming out of that.
Dave?
Real quick, so the county bicycle pedestrian advisory committee is recruiting new members. There's a job posting out on the county's website. And currently the deadline is the 9th. I don't think we've got a whole lot of applications so far, so it'll likely get extended. So if you know anybody that might be interested, or if you're interested, I know Peter's gonna have some free time. We could apply.
Yeah, No, is there, my question is, would be a conflict if I got on his committee?
I don't think so.
I'm on my committee.
Okay, I'm just about to ask.
No, I think it's, yeah, you could
Okay.
serve on that.
Okay.
All right, anyone online have any updates they'd like to share? All right. So our next TAC meeting is tentatively scheduled for July 5th. We'll see if we hold to that date or not, but
Should we bring in fireworks?
yeah. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
It's a new bed rules. You know,